Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 92 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descendant life forms are so amazingly primitive that two of them still think doing a podcast called Digital Watches are a pretty neat idea is a pretty neat idea. These podcasters have, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Actually, this is the solution. So, Jeff, what is this?
Well, Brian, this is our discussion of issue 2 of Douglas Adams' Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, comic by IDW.
Yep, it sure is. Oh my gosh, I can't even describe to you. I mean, I'm looking at this cover page, and I'm looking at that hairdo.
Yes, well, I'm thinking that the illustrators of this comic were a little bit lazy because they didn't draw in any nose hair. Because that's all you're looking at is right up his nose.
And it looks like they just flattened out his hair and stuck it straight out like he's wearing a baseball cap.
Yes. So the image we are looking at appears to be Dirk holding a flashlight in one of the storage rooms of the San Diego Museum. And it's a shot from below looking straight up under his chin, up his nose, to the ceiling.
That's right. And on the ceiling, you can see a little cat staring down from the top shelf.
Yes.
All the old names, Ryall, Atkins, Lindsay, and O'Grady, but they seem to have added one, didn't they?
They've added a Wyasek, and I'm not sure what, because I did glance ahead to see what he did, and this issue does not have what his role was in this book.
Okay. I guess we can dive right in.
So we'll dive right in to the first inside page, which is a previously on.
Oh, right. Yep.
So this is just a reminder that Dirk walked into a cafe and determined that it would be a great base of operations for Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And then we're introduced to Susan and Tanya again. They are the owners of the cafe. So we get to meet Crowther, who's got the fancy gold phone, and he's the friend of Virgil, who was killed last episode. And then we get a little peek into the museum where the very pompous museum curator is talking about their extremely costly collection that is about to be exhibited. And then we meet a mummy who is sucking the life out of everybody. And Dirk is going through his bag, and there is a shocked face from Hamish that's going, "Oh, dude."
Of course, Dirk is opening up the murder bag of Bill and Estelle.
Yes.
Full of all kinds of incriminating evidence.
Right. And once again, it reminds us that everything is connected. So on to page 2, we get a list of everybody who we have met so far, and this does answer a question that we were kind of knocking around. We have Dirk Gently. We all know Dirk. And then we have Susan, and she is the owner with Tanya. And what I didn't know is Tanya's an orchestral musician. Did you catch anything from the previous issue that says she's an orchestral musician?
I don't recall that. Or does she play the viola? Why do I have that in my memory?
She might. She might. I don't remember it, but they probably put it in there.
Mm-hmm.
We have Estelle and Bill Parsnip, who are loving vacationers, who are also the copycat killers, a serial killing duo. We have Hamish, the college computer geek, who's hanging around at the cafe. Crowther, the homeless man, and coffee shop patron, mostly for the bathrooms, and friend of the slain man, Virgil.
Mm-hmm.
We have the immortal Mr. Bird, mysterious and immortal, at least as far back as ancient Egypt, and he's a mystic, and he's currently distributing odd phones to the homeless in San Diego. The mummies were both the kids. Neither one of these is the kid. So it's Neferhotep and Craig.
Mm-hmm.
And it does say that Craig's name and dialect are both more modern than makes any proper sense. And we have Kate Schechter. That's a name from the past, but was not in the last episode.
No.
And she's a professional American, former paramour of the god Thor, and closest thing Dirk had to an assistant in the case known as The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul. So I guess I'm happy to see they're going to work back a familiar character.
Yeah, and you're right. We do get that answer whether the second body in the crypt was a king or the friend, and it turns out it is the friend, in fact.
I'm a little bit confused as to why it's wearing that headgear.
Well, I think if you looked at the first panel where you see the friends, it's more like his hair than a headgear. I mean, other than the little gold ring around the top of his head.
Right.
What's represented around his head does look like headgear, but I think it's actually representing his hair.
Okay.
Which would be odd, because I don't know mummies had hair. So maybe you are right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go on to page 3 and start this next chapter.
I really want to know now whether mummies have hair.
Well, it's probably there, just disconnected.
Yep.
So this issue starts out in Balboa Park, which appears to be some kind of a zoo as well. And Dirk and Tanya are walking together, and Tanya's really not sure what they're doing there because he's got a case, and he's trying to say that it's all part of his process. But he can't just walk silently. He's got to talk about something, whether he knows anything about it or not. So he's just laying out line after line of BS, and some of the other park attendees are overhearing him, and they're all falling in line behind him because they think it is one of those walking tours. So give us a couple ideas, Brian, of some of his BS.
Right. He says that, of course, you have to understand the nature of the place, or the history of the place, rather, if you're going to understand how it's all connected. And he says, take this park, for instance. It's named in tribute to the legendary pugilist and San Diego native, Rocky Balboa.
Right. Balboa Park. Makes sense.
And it's the city's epicenter. And as such, its ley lines can reveal all. Oh my gosh.
He also said that the exteriors for the mansion in Citizen Kane were shot here in this very park, and all the animals from that movie are still alive and reside there.
And then, of course, after a while, Tanya stares back at him and says, those facts seem wrong to me.
Yes.
I've lived here all my life.
And then he also reveals that the answers anyone seeks about a town can be found within its many street meets or its museums. Both, which abound in this park. And Tanya's very unhappy about the crowd that he is having gathering around them. So we'll go on to page 4. So Dirk and Tanya just stop and are having a conversation, and Tanya is saying that with everything that you found in the suitcase, you need to go to the police. And Dirk says, you can't trust the police, especially not with something as important as this paper that he found that says serial killers to emulate. And Dirk is saying, that proves you can't trust anyone with this. And Tanya's asking, but that came from the suitcase, and that's evidence, and that's tampering. And he's like, hey, no, don't worry about any of that. So while they're having this discussion, some of the tourists are saying, hey, and asking questions like, why did the tour stop? And Tanya's yelling, this isn't a tour! This isn't a tour! And Dirk said that it stopped for tips, because this is the part of the tour where the hat is passed and money is proffered. And he'll be needing a hat as well as tips. And the guy's going to give him his hat, and somehow a gust of wind must have blown, and Dirk lost the paper he was holding, and it's flying up in the air out of his reach.
Oh, boy. And, of course, through every one of these panels, Tanya refers to herself as an associate, and Dirk insists on calling her an assistant.
Correct.
She's getting more and more upset about that, and, of course, Dirk just says, oh, it's semantics. My point stands.
Yes. And what I find interesting in this, and I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just a happy chance and means absolutely nothing at all, but when Dirk is described in the books, he's described as wearing a certain type of hat. And there is a gentleman in these panels wearing exactly the type of hat I pictured Dirk Gently to be wearing.
And that's the one that's offered by the bystander in the crowd.
Yes, as his paper flies away. So let's go on to page 5 and find out where the paper ends up. This is one of those panels, the lower left panel, that I always get confused as to which direction do they actually want me to read it. And I believe it's the highest first. So it would be the top center, lower left, and then to the right. But it's like, who says what first?
Right.
Not that it makes any difference, because they're not answering a question, but it's always the trouble I have with comic books when they do the bubbles in a way, because I don't know protocol that well. So now we see Dirk holding on to his new hat, chasing after the piece of paper.
Along with at least half the members of the crowd as well.
Yes. And he's yelling for the foul winds to cease. And wouldn't you know it, they end up at the San Diego Natural History Museum. And as the paper is blowing up the steps to the entrance, there's a couple of punk kids walking down. And one of them steps on the piece of paper, and Dirk is like, pardon, dear fellow, I'll just be needing this. He says, it's just a rubbish list of serial killers, part of my grand tour. And this is where Tanya realizes they're at the Natural History Museum, and that she's going to be playing in the Tutankhamun Gala here in a few days. And one of the kids asks, do you know Tutankhamun? And she's like, well, I studied him in school, but beyond that, no, just playing his party. And then we get a close-up of one of the kids, and we realize that this is probably Craig, who says, oh, right, of course, his party. He's still very dead. Ha, how silly of me.
Right, and as we get this close-up, we can see pretty clearly that neither of these two lads have any hair.
No.
And they're wearing the security guards' outfits that are shabby and hanging loosely on their very thin bodies.
Yes, one of them does appear to be wearing also a feather boa.
Yeah, odd but true.
That can sum up, I think, this whole comic book. Or truly odd. All right, so we'll move on to page 6. So Dirk, ever the opportunist, decides to continue his tour and include Craig and Nefer Hote. We're just going to call him Hote. Into his tour. And he's explaining to everybody the necklace that Craig is wearing is reminiscent jewelry dating back to 1345 BC, King Tutankhamun's time. Also, the era which gave birth to iced tea. And then Craig and Hote are talking to each other, wondering how he could have known where the necklace was from. And they're like, this guy's interesting. Let's just see what he has to say. And he keeps going on and on about the necklace being hand-carved in the museum by Metalworks that specializes in recycling used car batteries. And so then they decide that he doesn't know anything, and now they're getting offended that he presumes to say anything about ancient Egypt and all of its wonders, and he's like, hey, who are you? He's like, why, I'm Dirk Gently, holistic detective and part-time tour guide. And then he says, now, as I was saying, King Tutankhamun was widely known to enjoy the company of a great many goats of his day. All above board, of course. Wonderful creatures, wonderful pets. So then Craig is going, well, that doesn't sound correct. We just left the museum after working there, and maybe we can join your tour. Do you know any hotels for two kings? And then Tanya's going, I've got this recital I need to practice for, so we do need to get to a hotel. And she mentions that it's called the Dell. And that piques Craig's interest, and he's wanting to know if the Dell is a nice hotel.
I failed to mention it on the previous page, but one of the things I thought was interesting is, of course, the crowd is still following him. And in the top panel on this page, they've got about 4 people with their cell phones recording video and taking pictures of the necklace and pictures of Dirk with his hat on. Just like you'd find today. No matter where you go, It's all about the social media.
Go on to page 7 in a moment here, but I'm thinking, I'm not sure where this is going.
I know.
Well, I'm sure it's going somewhere, and we will find out. So on to page 7. In a nutshell, what's happening on this page is that Dirk decides to take the 2 kids and the entire tour group back to the Hotel Dell for a party, as long as they pay an extra $5 apiece.
And they all eagerly agree and start throwing money at Dirk.
Yes. Tanya thinks that's going a bit too far, and Dirk explains that it's the most he's been paid for a case in months. But they don't know how they're going to get everybody there, because $5 a person, and who knows where this hotel is. And so somebody suggests that since it's San Diego, they should take a party bus.
And in response to the question about the party bus, Dirk says, a party? A bus? Ah, yes, an invention of utmost genius, generally but inaccurately credited to Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, so he is just continuing with his lines and lines of BS. He can't turn it off.
Oh.
On to page 8. So over half of this page is taken up with the image of a party bus, which I don't know if it's a real thing or not, but it seems to be in traffic. It seems to be a bus, and it seems to be a moving bar that has the stools on the outside completely exposed to the traffic.
I do know that a version of this is available. I'm not sure whether they're motorized quite like this, but...
Or street legal?
Yes, or street legal. Yeah, that would be the question. Because they seem to be on the highway in the picture. At least a 2-lane road,
Right. And they're partying, and they've just got music blasting and blasting and blasting. And then Dirk is asking Craig and Holt if they are from Egypt because of their accents. He can tell that they're from there. And Craig says that Holt hails from Africa, but he's been around. But thanks to God, we're free now, of work, that is. And Holt really wants the music turned off because it's hurting his head. And he's really just very, very hungry because their boss, Mr. Bird, did not feed them properly. So I'm almost afraid to find out on the next page what they're going to eat and who they're going to eat on this party bus.
Well, the odd part about this page, I think, is how the heck did Dirk acquire a party bus? He seems to, he's driving. He's the one doing the driving.
Yes, he is.
Oh my gosh.
Well, he had a whole hat full of fivers. So on to page 9. On the party bus, one guy is saying that he heard someone say they were hungry. And he's like, hey, if you're hungry, I've got enough to go around. Try some of this. And he's handing out cotton candy. So Holt gets his first taste of cotton candy, and he thinks it's very good. But in classic comedic style, he is looking at the guy who gave him the cotton candy, and he's picturing him as a roast chicken. And he is thinking that he could go for a larger morsel or even a whole group of morsels.
Right. So in the top panel, you see them crossing a bridge, and clearly they're on, 6-lane highway, because 3 lanes are going in the direction they are. So
right.
This is some street legal vehicle they're talking about with their butts hanging out.
Yeah.
And then I can't help but laugh when I'm looking at the tourists, and the guy pulls out his cotton candy from a fanny pack. In a previous panel you saw where most of them were wearing cargo pants.
Right.
And in the last panel, there's an overhead shot of the Hotel del Coronado that they're pulling into with the bus.
Yes. And anybody on vacation knows pockets are a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. At least it's not a merce, right?
That's right. Could have been a satchel, though.
Oh, yes. Could have been a satchel. That would have been more appropriate.
Or, what's the word? Portmanteau?
Yeah, portmanteau. Of course, I don't know where they get the definition of portmanteau. It seems to go every which way.
Right. All right, so on to page 10. So we don't get to see the feeding frenzy right now. And they jump from Hotel del Coronado to the Natural History Museum Atencomen exhibit. And a couple of museum employees are talking about how they're going to handle what happened. And they're going to say that people were struck ill and it was probably a gas leak because everybody believes in a gas leak. They talk about, as long as it stays quiet, keep it low key. We need discretion. Staff have family, friends. Everybody's good health and recovery is what we want to talk about. And then they're like, has anybody found Carlos and Bobby? So they're cleaning staff. They weren't security guards. So
okay.
So Craig and
Holt
came out in cleaning staff because obviously they got it from Carlos and Bobby.
Yep.
And they're just thinking that they went out and had a drink because they've been known to do that. But somebody setting up the exhibit removed a couple of loose bandages and they think they found Carlos and Bobby.
Right, and in the top panel you see the 2 folks from the museum. One guy's got his hair swept back into a ponytail that's braided in the back, and his beard is also braided in the front.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And you can see the guys digging through the sarcophagus.
Right.
So we're going to move on to page 11. So on this page, they're all standing over the sarcophagus looking down into it. And they're saying it's definitely Bobby, but his body is all desiccated just like the others. And this is definitely going to have a negative impact on my year-end review. And then the police walk in asking what the problem is because dispatch was a bit vague. And the guy with the double braids on both ends of his head is like, tell them nothing. And then their problem? Oh, no, that's overstated. Everything's fine here. You know, it's just exhibits and all. And the cops are saying, the 911 call didn't sound fine. It sounded like unconscious bodies and crazier rantings. What do you all know about it? So we do get a good look of Bobby's desiccated body.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I think is interesting on the bottom panel, it's just weird, but they say that faces and hands are the hardest thing to draw. And if you look at the one detective's set of hands, it's like they're bigger than his entire head.
Right, yes.
It just looks a little weird. And the other police officer's hand seems to be, I don't know, wrapped in something or...
Yeah, it looks like it's wrapped in rope.
It's weird.
And then, of course, the 4 people that they're talking to are all very obvious trying to obscure their view into the sarcophagus.
Mm-hmm.
We will move on to page 12. So the police are kind of wandering and looking around, and they notice a case with broken glass, and one of them hears a faint sound ringing, kind of more of a vibration than an actual sound.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, oh no, in our pre-gala haste, we made a small mess and someone must have panicked, that's all. It's like, well, what about the bandages this guy's holding? Oh, no. Sometimes you have to unwrap the past to prepare for the future. And eventually the cops are like, well, as long as you're sure, go on easy on 911 next time. We've got better things to do. And just as they're about to leave and everybody's looking relieved, from off the page, somebody says, hang on, please. This is a comic with all the story is really being told in the dialogue, not in the pictures. Mm-hmm. The last issue was better at that.
Mm-hmm. So on the top panel of page 12, you can see that the broken display case is one that probably had the necklace in it, because there's a neck and a top of the torso.
Right.
So that's probably where the necklace was stolen from.
Absolutely.
And in the bottom panel, actually in the center panel, the guy with the beard and the hair, his face keeps changing shape. Where it's gaunt and lean in the first panel, it's kind of round and puffed out in the second panel, and then of course on the bottom panel he's about to faint. He looks like he's ready to hit the floor.
Right. Pointing out that the necklace came from that display case is perfect, and it is telling the story with a picture. So now we'll go to page 13. It seems that the disembodied voice from page 12 was Kate Schechter. That's Schechter. 2 C's, 2 H's, 2 E's, and also a T and an R and an S. Assemble them in any order, and they spell Special Agent CIA. So she's quickly become my favorite character right now in this comic.
Yep, absolutely.
And she says that she's from the CIA, as in Central Intelligence Agency. Well, I'm certainly not here to cook you haute cuisine. And then she's like, cook for you? Culinary Institute of America? Never mind. It's like she's telling a joke. Nobody gets it because they're all freaked out about what's going on. And now that the CIA is there, she tells the San Diego Police Department that this is out of your jurisdiction now. She's taken over.
Right. And they must have been thinking about our podcast during these last 2 panels of this page.
Correct.
Because Kate says, I'll take it from here, gentlemen. This is officially out of your jurisdiction now. And one of the police officers says, what? This? These people just assured me there is no this.
Right.
And Kate goes, oh, yes, there's a this. And I'm definitely here for a this. But it's an international this, so you're both free to go. Thank you.
Right.
And then she turns to the bearded gentleman and she says, now let's talk about this properly and honestly.
Okay? So, yeah, this is very prominent in this page.
I love it.
So we're going to go to page 14. So here the museum staff is standing around looking at Bobby and Carlos, who appear to be okay. They're just kind of sitting up and now having something to drink to get their strength back, saying that the whole last hour or so of work has been pretty fuzzy. And then Kate saying, well, that begs the question, does it? Yes, I think the question's rather obvious, too. Of course, without never asking the question. And then the bearded guy wants to know how the CIA even knew about the missing mummies. And she said it was drones. He's like, oh, what's that? The writing on the wall looks sort of fresh. Part of your display? And she's taking pictures. And then we get to see a series of hieroglyphs that are written on the wall between 2 display cases. And one of the museum workers is very disappointed because the mayor is going to have to know about this now. And Kate says, not right away. Not as long as the missing mummies are returned here unharmed.
Which seems an odd way of saying that.
Yes, very odd.
So here it begs the question whether all of the other people that were attacked by the mummies are alive or not, because, of course, Carlos and Bobby appear to be anyway.
Right.
But we haven't seen the other characters from the previous panels.
No, we haven't, but they did imply they were sick.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Not dead and disposed of in the basement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, one of the two is complaining about ringing in his ears.
Right.
Must be Carlos, because
Yes.
Bobby is the other one. So Carlos is talking about more ringing in his ears, but only he and the one cop has been affected by it.
Right. Weird.
So we'll go on to page 15. So we jump back to the Del Coronado Hotel, and Dirk is telling everybody that the tour is going to continue inside, and Holt is still really hungry and wants to absorb all of the life forces there. And Craig says that he wants a big palatial room, perhaps a party upstairs. And Dirk is like, well, there's always the matter of funding such a feat. And Craig takes off his necklace and holds it out and says that one thing I've learned in all of my travels is that every era responds well to shiny things.
And he holds out the big necklace full of gold.
Right. And then we seem to kind of jump back in time where Bill and Estelle are watching everybody leave the tea shop on their way. And they're finally glad that they're leaving. And Bill's going to go into the tea shop to try to retrieve his bag. And Estelle is going to
settle everyone's hash.
Yes. It's going to follow the group to the gaudily dressed baggage thief.
It's kind of funny because when you're looking at Estelle and Bill, I think of Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver.
Yes.
Because she's dressed in a proper dress, but here when you look at him, he looks more like Andy Griffith.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, a side view of the second panel in the center of the page. Bill looks a lot like Andy Griffith there, doesn't he?
Yes. And in the lower left panel, Estelle seems to have a lot of people on her balcony.
As the French say. Oh.
Now on to page 16. So we were incorrect in assuming it was a flashback to when Dirk and Tanya left the coffee shop. This was, I guess, happening now when Susan and Crowther and Hamish are leaving the coffee shop. So
you're right.
They stayed behind when Dirk and Tanya went out.
Mm-hmm.
And Susan is extremely worried about Dirk, and she doesn't mind weirdos, but there's just something off about Dirk. And Crowther all of a sudden gets really dizzy and tired, and he's just kind of bent over at the waist, resting on his knees, and he's needing to rest. And he's blaming it on his phone, which has that soul, S-O-U-L, power. So every time he talks on his new phone, it seems to make him tired. So obviously, draining his life energy.
Mm-hmm.
And Susan's like, well, you've been through so much recently. And he's like, it's Virgil who went through it all. And then we see at the end, with a weird, sly, evil look, Estelle is watching and listening to all of this with great interest. More interest than I really know why she has.
So throughout the panels on this page, Hamish is playing with a ball and a cup game.
Yes.
Where he's got the ball on the string and he's trying to catch it in the cup, and he's concentrating, and every panel has a version of him missing. And,
yes.
And he says, oh, crap. And then he's concentrating really hard, and you can see the ball in his eyes, and he's going, come on, come on. And then it bounces off of Susan's head.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it falls into the cup, whack. And he goes, yes, I rule, I rule, I rule.
So he's totally oblivious to Crowther having all of these problems.
Right, exactly. And you're 100% correct. They just completely miss it every time, where they ought to have an Easter egg, and they don't. Because on the third part of the panel, they have a light pole, and on the light pole there happens to be a notice.
Yes.
Where you pull off the tags along the bottom.
Right.
Perfect spot for an Easter egg. That's where it should have been. but it's
cello
not.
lessons.
Exactly. I mean, anything they could have done there. Right. Cello lessons would have been perfect.
But yeah, that so far has been my biggest disappointment, is how often they've had places for these Easter eggs and don't put anything.
Mm-hmm. But Estelle, surely does look like June there.
Yes. All right, page 17. So we jump to Dirk at his room in the hotel, and it ends up being room 3502, which he says is the scene of a legendary party that L. Frank Baum, the author of The Wizard of Oz, once threw for the movie Munchkins at that hotel. And it was debauched, and it was the topic of every tabloid gossip column, but he does not doubt that they will be able to top it today. And then he throws open the doors to the room, and they all go in, and he looks at one of the party goers, the one with the fanny pack who was handing out the cotton candy, and just wants him to keep his eyes open for anything strange. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what, like light beer instead of microbrew? He says, never mind, I'll handle it. And then he goes in to party. And it ends with a concerned face of Dirk wearing his funny red hat.
Mm-hmm. So in the middle panel, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like our friend Estelle has joined the crowd. She does seem to be wearing some dark glasses, I think.
And a big floppy hat.
Yeah, big floppy hat. Yep.
So do you think she put some kind of a coat on over the dress that she was wearing?
It does appear to, yeah. It appears that she put a coat on over her dress.
But there is obviously a woman here who looks like she is in disguise.
That's right. That's right.
And hopefully we'll find out on page 18 who that woman is. Oh, this is a double panel, so this would be a page 1819.
Mm-hmm.
This double panel starts out with the whole top section being an overview of the lobby area with cart after cart after cart of room service going up to the party that is on the top floor for a tour group. So Hamish and Crowther have also arrived at the hotel because Susan wanted to talk to Tanya about Dirk. And Hamish is trying to find the solar power app on his phone, but he can't find it in the app store. And Crowther is just saying, hey, he gave me the phone with the app, and a free phone is a free phone. And if I use it a lot, he said, it'd be a hotspot. And Hamish is like, oh, so you're a Wi-Fi generator now? And he's like, oh, pretty lady alert. And she's smiling at me. Mm-hmm. So Estelle walks in and is like, BRB, dude, don't wait up.
So I guess I was wrong. I guess the lady in the previous picture wasn't Estelle.
Yes, because she just arrived.
She just arrived.
And it does say 20 minutes later up on the top.
Right. Just coincidentally looked like her.
Yes.
I'm glad I can be surprised.
Yes. Well, I wonder why that one woman is so covered up in her overcoat and big floppy hat and sunglasses inside.
I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
We'll go to page 19.
Oh, that's a good place to start.
And it's another double panel.
Oh, wow. Oh, one single huge panel, yeah.
So this is an overview of the room layout of the party suite up on the top floor that the tour group has gone to. And everybody's partying, and we're going to go through some of what they're saying here. But the important thing is, in some of the other rooms of the suite, Holt and Craig are draining the life out of the guests, so they finally get to feed.
Right. As Holt is feeding on the folks in the back rooms, we see up in the front, Craig is drinking a toast, looks like with a martini. And then down in the left part of the center of the page, one of my favorite lines of all time is being reenacted. There's a gentleman with a beer in his hand, and he's talking to a friend across the way. And the gentleman said, I told her I'm a dreamer, a speculative philosopher. And the other guy says, in other words, an idiot.
Right.
And in the middle of the party, Tanya is talking to some guy in a baseball cap. And she says, hey, you live and learn. Well, at any rate, you live.
Right.
Oh. And then two people are at the buffet line.
Yep.
One says, a free lunch. And the other says,
lunchtime is an illusion. So finally, after all this time, they're putting in some Easter eggs.
Right. And then there's another shot of looks like a lady, actually, in a feathered cap. Not the same one we saw from the previous panel. But she says, you want to see my spaceship?
Right. It's Zaphod in disguise.
In the top middle of the page, on the first part of the page, you see a shot of Dirk. And he says, life is wasted on the living, my good man.
Yes, he does. Yes.
So you're right. Every single Easter egg in the entire book is on one double page.
Right.
And anyway, it's kind of interesting. There is like a little path in this panel that is being taken by Dirk. In the top of the panel, on the second-ish page, you see Dirk is looking for Hote.
Right.
And he says, have you seen our out-of-time party host? And then he says, there are things that I should discuss with Hote. And he opens a door and he sees Hote sucking the life out of some young lady.
Yes. And back in the party room, you know it's not a party until somebody ends up in their underwear. And that has happened. So it is officially a party.
Uh-huh.
So we'll go on to page 20. Okay, it seems that the Hotel del Coronado is where Tanya is going to perform for the museum gala.
Correct.
Because she has her viola and she's being wished good luck by Susan. And Crowther is there and he's looking at something going, what's that? And Tanya's trying to assure Susan that Dirk is harmless. And as that's happening, you see attention, and Susan and Tanya and Crowther are all there and like quiet. And Crowther's got his fancy phone and he's recording up in the balcony that it's Dirk, but not as he would have hoped Dirk to be, because he's like screaming bloody murder and he's saying, mummification in progress. Please exit the building in an orderly fashion. So
I think if we remember the context a little, Tanya and Dirk arrive at this hotel the morning of, I guess, the gala. And Tanya was the one who suggested that's where they needed to go, because that's where the gala was. She had to go practice.
Yes.
So apparently she's been practicing with the group during the party, or during part of the party. And the party's been going on most of the day at this point.
Right.
Of course, this is the final panel.
Yes.
And on the bottom of the panel, it reads, next time, proper hotel etiquette. Killer tourists and Dirk and Kate make a reconnection in Chapter 3 of The Interconnectedness of All Kings, subtitled, Life is for the Living.
Yes. And if you remember from last issue,
Mm-hmm.
the subtitle of this one was Animal Husbandry and Wifery. How do you blend that in?
Except for the fact that they were at the zoo.
Except for the fact that they were at the zoo.
For a few minutes, which they didn't show any animals or anything, but
right.
Oh well. Oh my goodness.
So obviously our next episode, be it a week 2 or the beginning of the next month, I'm not quite sure yet, just stay tuned, is going to be issue 3 of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency.
Fantastic.
The Interconnectedness of All Kings. And now that we know what's happening next time, Brian, what are those famous words?
This is the end.
Thank you for listening to this. A new episode is released on the first Thursday of every month. A special thank you goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettyneatidea.buzzsprout.com. While there, you can find links to all of my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can contact us via email at digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook at Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. You can message us on Twitter, or should I say X, at Watches Idea, and our Instagram is Watches Idea Podcast.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.